Hey guys, welcome back. I'm Jeb Smith, and in today's video, we're going to discuss something in the housing market that I'm starting to see become a big problem. If you've watched my videos before, you know I'm a huge proponent of the housing market. You know, I've been saying all year long that I think 2020 is going to be a solid year, along with 2021. But recently, I've started to see something with regards to affordability that's becoming a bigger issue. And it's not the fact that people are paying more and more for homes, but it's how they're getting to the appraised value. There's something called an appraisal waiver, which we're going to discuss in more detail today. We're going to discuss what an appraisal waiver is, how it works, and how it's actually hurting the housing market. But before we dive into that, I want to take a minute and ask a favor. If you find value in this video as you're going through it, do me a favor and hit that thumbs up. And if you like videos like this, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button. So before we dive into what appraisal waivers are and how they're affecting the market, let's talk about the market in general. What's been driving the housing market? Where do we stand? What have we predicted for the rest of 2020 into 2021? So as I've mentioned all year long, you know, our housing market has been driven by a very low supply of housing. Not a lot of available homes for sale. Here in Southern California, where I'm located, you know, there's less than 4,000 homes on the market in a community, in a county that has 3.2, 3.3 million people. So not a lot of available property on the market, very high buyer demand that's being driven by low interest rates. And this is not just a problem that's happened in 2020. This has been leading up to 2020 and has become a bigger problem in 2020. And when rates went down, you know, below 3% and continued lower, and likely will continue lower, demand has just gone through the roof. And so with that, what we've seen is people paying more and more for houses because, you know, now with lower interest rates, they can actually afford more property. You know, that higher priced property is now the same monthly payment as you know, a home that was $100,000 or $150,000 less last year. Now, while that does require a bigger down payment, more property taxes, etc., people are willing to pay more because in some cases, in some markets, they're actually getting more home. But that's not the problem I see. The problem that I'm starting to see is something called an appraisal waiver. Now, an appraisal waiver isn't given on every file. It's a case-by-case basis. It has to be run through an automated underwriting engine. You have to put in the property address and what have you. And what it does is it's essentially it's a waiver on the appraisal. What does that mean? Well, that means if you're buying a property and say the property's listed at $630,000 for conversation purposes, and you decide that you want to put an offer in for $700,000, that's $70,000 above the asking price. In some cases, you might get an appraisal waiver. How does that benefit you as a buyer? Well, it allows you to purchase that property that you wanted to pay more money for, not pay for an appraisal. An appraisal in this market, at least in Southern California, is going to cost you somewhere around $500 or so. And so that's money out of your pocket that you don't have to pay. And also you can assure that the property is going to appraise so that you're not going to have any issues with the appraisal. You're not going to have to renegotiate the appraised value if it comes in less. And so it's somewhat security for a buyer. And it's really good for sellers because sellers now no longer have to worry about the appraised value on those properties. Now, you see where I'm going with this, how that could be an issue. But before we talk about that part, I want to talk a minute about how you actually get an appraisal waiver. So appraisal waivers are only given, at least this is my understanding, on properties that are under $1 million or with a loan amount is under $1 million. You have to have a good down payment, so probably 20% or more, and you have to have good credit scores. Now, if you don't have all three of those, chances are you're not going to get that waiver. But I've actually seen it on 3 of the last 4 transactions I've done where the appraisal isn't needed on those. 2 of those, I was representing the seller, and I'm going to talk about how the seller benefited in both of those scenarios. So one scenario was the example that I gave you a moment ago. The purchase price on the property, or the offer price that we listed the home for, was $630,000. We ended up getting 13 offers on the property. The offer that we accepted was $700,000, so $70,000 above the asking price. Now you might be saying, well, Jeb, you probably priced the property low. No, we went over the comps with the seller and we thought the value of the property was somewhere between 620, 630. We thought that, if you use certain comps on that particular property, you might be able to get 670 on it. So we priced it a little aggressively to receive, multiple offers, or low rather, so that we could receive, so that people would get aggressive in making offers, and chances are it would sell above the asking prices. And this is in an area that's hot and where home prices are still under the median for Orange County. And in this case, it ended up selling for $700,000. They got an appraisal waiver on the property, so they no longer have to ask for an appraisal on the property. The buyer's not going to do an appraisal. So that $700,000 on that particular property now becomes the new comparable for that neighborhood. In a neighborhood that was selling for properties somewhere between 620 to maybe 650, the $700,000 comp is now the new comparable. So when the neighbor decides to list his house, he can justify a $700,000 price if his property is comparable to the one that I'm selling. And you see how that can become an issue. That is one reason why affordability is becoming more and more of a problem. You wonder how people are going in, making offers way above the asking price, and how property values are continuing to rise so rapidly. And I can't say that this is the sole cause of it, but I can say it's definitely a problem, and is going to become more and more of a problem, because what it's doing is it's pushing property values up a lot quicker than they would go naturally. If you had to do appraisals on these properties, the property values wouldn't be going up quite as fast, because on this particular property that I was talking about a moment ago, chances are an appraisal comes in maybe 670 on that property. And so instead of being 700,000, it's 670. And now, yes, values may go up, but they're not going up at such a rapid rate, because say the next property comes on the market, and it's listed at 725, and they get an appraisal waiver, and that happens, then that's, you can see where this happens. And the other example I gave was not quite as dramatic, but it was a list price of 875. They made an offer of 901, and they got an appraisal waiver, and we already thought at 875 we were probably priced pretty high, towards the end of the market. Maybe it could appraise for 9. But at the end of the day, we didn't have to worry about it because we got the appraisal waiver. So, I don't know where this leads us in the long term. At the moment, I'm truly believe that supply and demand are going to drive the housing market. It's, as long as supply stays low, and demand stays high, which it will because of interest rates, you're likely going to see this sideways to up housing, the housing market's going to move sideways to up. But appraisal waivers this is going to be something you're going to look back on, and it's going to be an issue in my eyes. I don't, again, know if they're going to continue these forever, but I do know right now it's something that, as a buyer, this is something you should be aware of. When talking to your lender, getting pre-approved. If you know the property address on the property, have them put it in. Maybe you could get an appraisal waiver. And I'm not telling you by any means that you should offer well above and beyond the asking price on a property just to get your offer accepted, because you're going to get an appraisal waiver. But there are people out there that are doing it, and it could be a way, if that's your approach, to get your offer accepted in some cases, if you know that you were going to get that appraisal waiver to start with. That way appraisal is not an issue. I don't recommend it, but as a buyer, people are doing crazy things at the moment, and so that could be a way for you to get a leg up in some cases. But for now, just something to think about. And as a seller, this is something to consider as well. I mean, I'm not telling you to go out and overprice your property, but you can list your property probably above what you think it's worth in this market because of things like this, especially if you're in one of these hot areas. But do me a favor, if you have questions, comments, think I'm crazy, whatever, comment below. I'll go back and address those. As I get new information, I'll continue to put it out. I appreciate you taking the time to watch. I appreciate your support, and we'll see you again soon. Have an awesome day. Bye-bye.